Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
We say blessings to all of you, Ometiotl. We thank the Creator and the ancestors for another day of life, another day of breath. We are so grateful to have Tata Sol come up and bless us today and all the universe and all the elements. We want to welcome you to the Healing Generations podcast as we sit here, as an ancestor's dream, just trying to fulfill our sacred purpose. And we thank you for joining us today to listen, to reflect, to dialogue. Our whole focus is bringing the medicine of generations of our ancestors to the forefront because we need it right now, especially as we're in the midst of this pandemic and we're in the midst of many pandemics, of looking at woundedness. We need the healing medicine of our ancestors. But we also want to be able to heal the generations of pain that are lodged in our spirits and our bodies and many systems as well. And we're very, very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to have un gran maestro with us today who has journeyed, been a wisdom keeper, a medicine carrier, a storyteller, cruiser, done all kinds of things, but and it also
you forgot Pinto.
Pinto, okay, all of those things that bring knowledge and wisdom that way, Maestro Ysidro Macias, who comes, you mentioned, comes from Soledad, right? You're from Soledad, the Salinas Valley.
We call it Chole.
Chole, yeah.
Chole.
Gonzalez High School. And then, studied at Berkeley as well. But a lot of knowledge, I know, a lot of your teachings have come from life and your journey. And, Maestro, I know, what a privilege it is to sit with you. And I just want to thank you personally, from me to you, because, it's because of people like you that it opened up the dialogue, opened up our spirit, opened up our curiosity to the true richness of who we are as a people and the medicine that we carry as a people. And, so as a maestro, I just want to thank you very, very much and allow you to introduce yourself in the way that you'd like to and just greet the audience.
Well, I appreciate everything that you said. And, como ti, like you also, I'm truly grateful cada día to, have the opportunity to have a day to experience, and to experience it with all our relatives, because at the end of the day, all of life around us is another version of ourselves. We're all energy in my worldview, which is a worldview which I adopted and was taught to by my maestro, Segura. Mm-hmm. Who, in my mind, was the true maestro. I'm just a carrier, carnal. I'm a conduit. I'm a bridge from that culture to the Chicanada. And why I was chosen to be that bridge, I have no idea. I asked him that question several times. Nunca me dio una respuesta, but it's happened ever since I've known him. So I'm just fulfilling my function. Y doy gracias to be with you today. Mm-hmm. And I truly agree with you 100% that, in the middle of this chingadera called the COVID, aquí hay una gran oportunidad to keep moving forward for our raza. And I think we're really at the cusp of seeing a grand transformation from our raza, because what I see from Facebook is I see a lot of yearnings for a native consciousness and the knowledge of who am I, especially because understanding, of course, that the majority of us are mestizos, right? So we don't have that lujo of having grown up amongst the Zapotecs or the Taromaras or the different pueblos in the Yucatan and stuff. We don't have that lujo of coming from a real tribe, so we know what the real native experience is all about. No, we're speculators, as mestizos, we're speculators. We have to use the DNA within ourselves, which we have, as well. Because with the mestizo se tiene que recordar to have more confidence in himself, is that the same raíces de los full bloods son las same abuelas de los full bloods son nuestras abuelas también. Okay, so we share those same roots. So what we have to do, we have to compensate for not having grown up in that native environment as mestizos by speculating and intuiting and going within ourselves in order to get that knowledge. And that's the bridge that I believe, the role that I was chosen to play in the scheme of things. So, más o menos, le doy gracias a todo el mundo. I hope going forward that we can keep moving that conciencia towards a native consciousness forward. I think we will. I honestly think we will. It's one or the other, carnal. As we'll get into later. As we'll get into later.
Right.
At the end of the day, we keep, como humanos, we think we're built real chingones, eh? We even, the Cristianos think that God looks like us, like the Father, Son, Abuelito from us. No, I mean, when you think about it, we're like analogous to bacteria. The bacteria in the face of Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is a living being just like me and you are. But she has a soul, she has a spirit, man. So this bacteria has been fucking up for a long time. And if you got a rash and shit all over you, ¿qué vas a hacer? You're going to wash yourself, you're going to change your diet, whatever you're going to, what they call the gabachos, or what Western society calls, you're going to do climate change. Huh? Se está limpiando, okay? Se está limpiando la jefita because she's got a cosmic role to play also. And if she doesn't fulfill that cosmic role by cleansing herself from all this, horrendous bacteria, pues, hey, válganse. I mean, I know we don't have any proof or actual evidence that Atlantis and Lemuria existed, but there's somewhere there in the human mind, in the myth, Martinez. And that really goes along when you study our ancestors and they talk about que estamos, according to the Hopis, either in el Cuatro Mundo or according to the Mexica or in el Cinco Mundo. The bottom line is that there have been 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 other human civilizations before this one. This human civilization's been around in the history of the world for 250,000 years. I mean, in universal time, that's not even the blink of a pinche eye. I mean, yeah, if you're cooperating with the cosmos, you stick around. If you're not, sálganse, cabrón. It's time to restart all over again. So, having said that, gracias for having me here. And, let's seguimos.
You mentioned, that consciousness. And I think that, in us going through life, there's a mental or psychological consciousness about something, but then there's a spiritual consciousness of what we experience that sometimes we can't explain, but we know it and we feel it. And I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about your journey in life, about, you mentioned you come from the Salinas Valley there. What I'm learning is all of that lifetime of journey, gives us teachings along the way. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about that journey and what you learned, and how it took you here to this consciousness that you have now.
Okay, gracias. Yeah, I think that's where everything should start, because like I was reading recently this great little book that came out from a Mayan daykeeper I think he's from the Quiche community. I forget the name of it, but I'm sure if you go on Google, you can check it out. The Mayan daykeeper, anyhow, what he's talking about is the Mayan perspective on the importance of calculating cuando naciste. Where was the cosmos when you were born? Okay. And I think that's in Western society, that's totally overlooked. That, okay, you were born, you're a Leo, you're a Chinio, you're a rabbit or a la chingada, whatever. Okay. But I mean, if you read that small little book, you begin to see the mindset of the native in terms of his, vision and how he placed himself within the cosmos, because that's what the native was in the end. He was a cosmic being, ¿entiendes? He had reached that level where ya estaba integrado al vato con los cosmos, okay? And so what this guy is talking about is not only do you have to look at where the stars and the galaxies were that at that exact time when you're, when you entered, when you came out of your mom's belly, your womb. But you also even had to go like 9 months before that, at the time of conception, because according to them, that's when life begins, when that pinche sperm hits the egg, and boom, ahí comienza la vida, that starts to eventually evolve like a plantita, into a small little plantita, until hasta que salga de la tierra, and the seed, ¿me entiendes? And then it brota, y ahí está la planta. So the importance then is that I think it's important that when we do look at where we come from, that we understand that we are unique. Each one of us is unique. And look at when you were born, and that's a humongous footprint if you're a detective in terms of seeing where you are. Now, in my particular case, yo tuve la gracia. For instance, I was born from a mother-father, the father of which had been killed like 4 months before I was born. And so, he was killed in a bar by another Mexicano que le pegó in the back of his neck y lo mató ahí, right there in the cantina, Wow. So I was still in my mom's belly. Now, at one time I was very angry about this, that my jefito was missing. I never had a chance to have a relationship with him. But then, after I learned, through the maestro, the worldview of our, ancestors, I realized that, when I was a spirit, I made the choice. I made the choice to be born into my jefita, knowing that my jefita was going to get killed. I made the choice to, knowing that 4 years later, after she had remarried and she was on a migrant trail, that she left my carnal and myself with our paternal grandfathers and grandmothers in Soledad, okay? And so I grew up with them from the age of 4. And it's interesting that was like my beginning, because both of them were born, my grandfather and grandmother were born in the late 1890s.
Wow. So
here I am, born in the 1940s, and I'm getting raised by 1890s folks. And they're teaching me all this stuff, Now, they were campesinos. And my abuelita was real católica. So those were the two things that were, I think, most powerful for my childhood. I grew up in a campesino environment. I myself was picking cotton when I was 3 years old on the migrant trail. I started working in the fields like all other Chicanitos and Filipinos and even Samokis when we were like 7 or 8, We were, picking tomatoes or el ajo, la cebolla, la zanahoria. And then, like I said in my book, when we were 13, and the Judíos, they get their bar mitzvah. Well, our bar mitzvah, when we turned 13, we got to graduate from what was la pizca and all that was piecework. ¿Entiendes? You got paid by how fast you were. But when you were 13 and you went to the desaje, which was spacing, then you were being paid by the hour, So theoretically, you could be a huevón, though the pinche mayordomo would push your butt no matter what. But the bottom line is that was a kind of environment, and it was totally non-aspirational for a Chicano. How the school system was set up for us to become the future farm workers of America. I always wanted to join the FFF, but I wanted the future farmers of America, not the future farm workers of America. And and the same thing in high school. It was all puro general course. There was no college prep a la chingada. Why take college prep? A lot of our raza couldn't handle it, and all the raza knew that there was no feria for them to ever go to college. So that was the mindset growing up in the rural environment. Incidentally, very different from the urban environment, Chicano. And why do I know? Because even though I was born and raised in a rural environment where my identity choices were two. You were either a Chicano because you identified with the rest of your cuates and the younger kids you hung out with, or you were Mexican, just like your fathers and your grandfathers. So we wanted to be different, and that's when we adopted, and that's when we attached into the identity of Chicano. There was no other identity back then. There was no Mexican. America wasn't even known. Didn't come around, as you well know, until the 1960 when MAPA was created and shit, So it was either you were either Chicano or you were Mexicano. And so I was a Chicano naturally, but obviously later on, as we tell our story, that whole definition of what a Chicano is and the identity of what it means to be a Chicano changed when the Chicano movement started in 1967. Okay. But anyhow, the other aspect of my upbringing that was real impactful was my abuelita was one of these super católicas, ¿me entiendes? I mean, she worked in the fields, so she was 61 when she died of cancer. Okay. No paro. And she would say, like, I kid you not, man, she'd probably say 50 rosaries during the day as she's doing whatever the work. And then after dinner, se sentaba, and she insisted that her daughters join her for another round of pinche rosarios for about 2 hours in caras, you know, with the velas and everything going. I mean, that's the kind of household I grew up in that was totally dominated by the Catholic Church. You know, every holiday, everything coincided with the Catholic calendar, right? The Easter, the Navidad, that whole los tamales, the buñuelos and all that other stuff. Gracias a Dios, I had as I'll talk about later in terms of maestros, I had a rebelde abuelo. He was not
rebellious like you, huh?
Yeah, he was not enamorado with a pinche priest, because our priests, incidentally, were all Irish. Okay, they actually brought them in from Ireland. You know, they weren't just the this and this. No, they were from Ireland. You know. Right. And so he was not as enamorado of them because, he pointed out, eran hipócritas, They would preach, obviously the gospel of Christ, but they didn't practice it. Simple things like, it was understood that the left side of the iglesia was for Mexicanos and the right side era for the gabachos. Now, in a town like Chole, 2/3 of which were raza, the only gabachos who were Catholics were the owners of all the farms, the Italian Swiss. Because all the other gabachos in town, the businessmen and shit, they were all Methodists and Presbyterians or pa acá. So the whole right side of the pinche church was reserved for the Italian Swiss. And there may have been like 10 or 15 Italian Swiss in there. And about 80 raza, but all the razas on the left side, Yeah. And then llegaba the inevitable bracero, apestoso de la chingada, probably take a bath that morning. He didn't care. He was there to worship, So he could always, obviously, look at all these fucking seats on the right-hand side. Se sentaba ahí, And right in the middle of his sermon, el pinche Irish priest en español para que según no entendieran los italianos, que, hey, muévense para allá, muévense para el otro lado, That kind of stuff that rankled me. Plus, the other thing, too, I always had, honestly, I could never wrap my head around equating Jesus with God, To me, it just didn't make sense that a person who lived a human lifetime in any way could be compared to God. I mean, back then, my concept of God was very limited. It was what the Católicos told me, which is God is everything, God always has been and always will be. And that was pretty much what I recall my Catholic teachings was. But in my mind, I was thinking, how could God be everything and be everywhere and a la chingada, and they're comparing this vato here. Yeah, right. I mean, an honorable life and a great example, y pa acá, but this guy's a human being, man. How can he be God kind of a deal? So that's the thing that rankled me with the Catholic Church since young, that made me, begin to question that religion. Over and above that, like I said, I was raised in a large family of campesinos. I had like 36 first cousins, spread out all the way from, Orange County in the south, where my family came from, Jalisco originally, to pick oranges in the orchards of orange, all the way up to the East Bay, So, I had tias por donde quiera because I had like 12 tias and one uncle. My father was one of two sons, and he was the oldest son and the second oldest kid. And so that's the environment that I was raised in within that kind of family,
Wow. So when was it that you actually began to, obviously early on you began to question, Catholicism and the way that they were defining the universe. But when is it that you consciously began to question the whole aspect of identity and our indigenous identity? When did that come into to play for you, that the consciousness began to have you question and explore?
That happened in 1968. I had been in Berkeley in the fall of 1968. I had arrived in Berkeley for the spring quarter 1968, and I organized the first Chicano group there, called the Mexican American Student Confederation. And then I stayed on for that summer, because they had this summer program where we got to live in the mission. And so I hooked up with this poeta Nicaragüense, Roberto Vargas.
Yeah.
And so he was working for a place called Horizons Unlimited. And so the Brown Berets had just been organized earlier that year, I believe, by David Sanchez and stuff in Los Angeles. So I told Roberto, hey, why don't we start a beret group with all your young kids and stuff, So I thought that was a good idea, and both of us thought it was a good idea. I have a good story I need to tell on this one, So I sent a letter. I called Carlos Montes and the Berets and said, hey, Carlos, we're starting a chapter in Sanfra, can you send me the buttons? And then no problem, So here we are in Roberto's flat, we're in those Victorian flats, I walk in, there's like 10 vatos, all young vatos, all these 10 young Chicanos and shit. So right away, I was a real rapper back then, I mean, I would rap, I love it. I was like a mini Fidel. I could rap on Chicanismo for 45 minutes an hour. Wow. I was in love with my rap, ¿me entiendes? So here I go, a la chingada, que sé que tanto, que Chicano power, this and that, And I had always gotten a wow reaction from everywhere else. And I'd been doing this for about a year and a half by then, because ever since the start of the movement in May of '67. But these vatos were like, what's happening here? So Roberto called, he saw that the energies weren't there, and he called a timeout. And we went to the cocina, and he handed me a glass of red. Supposed to be how they do things here in Northern California. A glass, Ana toque, Right. So, wow, this is an interesting way to do politics. I mean, I was from Southern California back then, or I had come from Southern California, because I had graduated from Santa Monica City. So I said, well, this is Northern California. So, we had a little chit-chat, smoke, had our little red wine. And then I thought, ¿sabes qué? Por it turned, look, carnal, do you know that none of those vatos out there are Chicanos? I said, what? What do you mean? Of course they're Chicanos. I said, no. There's like 3 of them are Nicaragüense, like 2 or 3 are Hondureños, the rest are Salvadoreños. The closest they had a half Filipino, half Mexican. That was the closest. They were, in other words, they were Latinos, because back then the Mission District was Latino. So, like a good revolutionary, after my little break, I went out there, and this time I switched it around. Instead of Chicano power, it was Latino power. And I still went and that played real well. Brown power always worked real well. And Viva la Raza, that played real well too. So by the time the meeting was over, we had them all enthused, and they were all, tocuchando. So anyway, following that, I went back to school at Berkeley in the fall of '68, and I just needed to break away. It was in one of those times. Looking back now, the spirits were calling me to Mexico. I needed to know who I was. So I hooked up. Back then it's remarkable how you could do things on a fly. And I hooked up with some carnal I didn't even know, from some Chicano from Oakland, part of the Merritt College group there. And they say, hey, anybody want to go to Mexico? Me, I feel like going to Mexico. Nos arrancamos. Both of us were cheapos. So we were living on we were staying in $3 a day, hotel rooms, and eating on the streets, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I had been to Mexico before when I was 11 to Aguascalientes as part of my family to go visit my uncle, who was AWOL from the Korean War there. My abuelito said, you're not going to fight for the gringos. You're going to go AWOL, So he came back and he did time for that. But anyhow, I had been there for that. And so, but to me, the Mexico I knew was a mestizo Mexico. Right. And I was in Mexico to try to get into Cuba, because I decided I was a revolutionary. And so we went to the Cuban embassy and we applied for a visa, ¿me entiendes? Because unless you went to Canada, that was the only way to get to Cuba. So the Cubano said, well, ¿sabes qué? Come back in a couple of weeks. So what are we going to do? Well, let's go conocer a part of Mexico that I've never been to before. So nos fuimos a Oaxaca, we went to Chiapas, and we went to Yucatan. Y me di cuenta that this was a different Mexico than I had seen before. This was an Indian Mexico. ¿Entiendes? The few mestizos like myself that were around, they didn't call us mestizos, they called us Ladinos, And it was very obvious that they were very reserved. towards any Ladino who was around, which was mostly, comprando cosas or whatever. And they preferred to speak amongst their own language, whatever it was. El Maya, el Tzetzel, el, Zapotec, whatever, Mixtec, Anyhow, so me di cuenta that, wow, these are raza, these are Mexicanos, but they're very different. But the connection was that on my mother's side I had my grandmother who lived in Soledad as well, but I didn't see her that often because she lived in what the Chicanos considered the barrio part of town. 2/3 of it was raza, but there was still a barrio part of the raza town, right?
Right.
And so she lived in the barrio part of town, and she was an India. She was a Yaqui from Sonora. But I had never, in my mind, I didn't know what an India was. To me, an India was a vato that was, getting it on with the cavalry in the movies and stuff, right? I had never associated India with Mexico. And my abuelita was, to me, my abuelita. But where I made the connection was that these women, whether they were in Oaxaca, in Chiapas, in the Yucatan, even in Mexico City, they all looked like her, man. They were Indians too, with trenzas and everything. And I said, wow. So in other words, my abuelita is an India.
Right.
See, I never, and so what does that mean? That means that I'm part Indio too. Okay. And so that's what, cuando se me prendió el foco, during that fall of 1968. And when I came back, I was already focused on going full blast into that. But then when I came back, I found out that I'd been elected chairman of the student group there as well. And within a couple of weeks after I came back, we went into the Third World Liberation Front strike for 2 months, in which from that point on, everything got, went in a lot of different directions. So I didn't get a chance to pursue that anymore other than internally. What bothered me is when I started looking into this, I saw a great inconsistency between what I was reading in Spanish and was coming out of Mexico, even from the chingones, right? The Alfonso Caso, the Leon Portilla, the Ángel Garibay, the learned, volumes after volumes put out by the UNAM, by their disciples and their students and whatever, all confirming that this worldview that was painted by the Spanish priests since 1519 was in fact the truth. That, that this matanza of, human hearts pounding down the fucking temples and cannibalism and, todo lo mal that could be imagined that has been promoted by the Euros in order to justify their needing to come and give us salvation, right, from our pagan history. Es un mentirero de la chingada. All of that is what I read in everything that was coming out of Mexico. But yet, I was reading, the Lakota, the Dakota, the Hopi, different tribus, different pueblos here, and their message was entirely different. And their message was consistent. And their message was nativist and in harmony with nature and just totally, and obviously they didn't have no multiple gods. I said, ¿Qué pasa? How did our people get so pinche corrupt?
Right. So when did you actually meet Andres Segura and
I met him it was at the 3rd annual Tenaz Festival de Teatro Nacional de Aztlán. It was held in Costa Mesa, and it was in the spring of 1972. Okay. Now, before that, como te dije, I was involved in the Third World Liberation Front strike at Berkeley, which I have to mention that in conjunction with the San Francisco State Third Liberation Front strike, those two strikes were the reason that ethnic studies were established in this country. And in fact, to be honest with you, the first ethnic studies established in this country was, in fact, at Berkeley, not San Francisco State, because ours was established like 2 weeks before. And why is that? Because Berkeley is the flagship of the system. And, it's the Trump Tower of the UC system. And without due respect to San Francisco State, they're the Motel 6 down the road. So, I'm sorry, but anyhow, that's why Berkeley got it first. But it was not because of our efforts alone. It was in combination with our carnales and carnalas at San Francisco State. So anyhow. following that, and I was kind of done with politics at that point in time. I decided to start focusing on my creative side, ¿entiendes? So I got involved with other vatos there in the East Bay, and we put together a magazine called El Pochoche. I don't know if you ever heard about it.
Yes.
And we had a lot of contributions from a lot of very well-known figures down the way, a lot of artistas, and we had stuff coming in from all over the Southwest. It wasn't just limited to Northern California kind of a deal, And it just so happens that I wrote an article that reaffirmed with me the importance of identity, and that ended up being probably one of the most, if not the most, talked about or whatever, reproduced articles in the first issue, because we had 3 issues, and that was called The Evolution of the Mind. And what The Evolution of the Mind talked about is, back then, I'm writing in 1969, but back then I already had experienced that you're evolving all the time. You're not staying where you are. That's part of life. And in the Chicano sense, I started by saying that the first thing was a recognition that you finally were a Mexican American. You came to a realization that, you're from this country and you have all these things that make you an American, but you still value, the consciousness or the identity of belonging to a culture, and therefore you identify with Mexican American. That's a very simplistic way of saying it, pero más o menos, okay? And then from there, I argued, then once you finally integrate that mentality or that identity enough, then you come to realize that you're really a Chicano, because a Chicano is someone who's evolved beyond Mexican American. Why? Because a Chicano now realizes that it's not only an individual journey, but it's a group journey. And it's not inconsistent for you to do what you can to better yourself individually and give as much as you can at the same time to your community. And so I argue that that's the Chicano way. And another aspect of Chicanismo versus Mexican American is, I said, Mexican Americans wait for evolution to happen. It's going to happen. That's part of the universe. Change is always going to be constant. It's always going to happen. Just sit on your ass and do nothing. But if you want faster change, then tienes que ponerte trucha, then tienes que darle gas. Here's a good story. A good time to put in a story regarding this very same subject from the maestro. It's 1972 we're talking. We're at the Costa Mesa cafeteria where we were having a teatro. We were having the meetings in there. We were giving performances in front of each other. And we had a little break in the action. So we're in the cafeteria part. People are getting, whatever drinks a la chingada. And everybody by then knew that Andres was this really strange Indio that was down here from Mexico, right? So I have to, I guess, describe him a little bit more. Yeah. Andres came with a group that was called Los Mascarones. This was a group of Mexican university students from the middle and higher class Mexico, In our country, we would call them wealthy hippies, okay, who were rebelling against, a lot of the chingaderas, the Tlatelolco and shit in 68, and they were all centered out of Cuernavaca. So they were well known, they had already traveled, I think, to Europe, y la chingada, and they brought the maestro with them because of his dance skills. He was a choreographer, okay, and even though their version of dance was more the European thing, maestro could handle it. He was a choreographer. He knew all kinds of dances. So here we are. Everyone se ha dado cuenta that this guy that's with the Mascarones and looks like he's from the streets of Mexico City. I mean, the vato, he was a mestizo, but he looked full on Indio. Long hair, dressed in real cheap rayon, wrinkled shirt and pants, huaraches that were, la chinga, with a red headband, headband, he called it, So here we are, and all this people were amazed and dazed by this presence, by this energy, by the stuff that this guy was talking. So he was talking about, evolution and consciousness and how it raises. And I remember one Chicano said, but maestro says, how about the Mexican Americans, Tell us how much better we are than them. We're Chicanos, tell us why they're pendejos y a la chingada. And he and several other people, echoed más o menos the same sentiments. And he just took it in all calmly and stuff and says, Señor, I forget, he says, mamacita, you like that, mamacita. Mamacita, lo que tienes que saber es que ustedes chicanos y los Mexican Americans van a llegar al mismo lugar. Oh, shit. It was like, what? La Chicanada was stunned. You're saying that me, Chicano, sacrificing myself, willing to put myself on the line? I gotta get to the same place, and the Mexican Americans just want to kick it and let everyone should do it for them. While they're enjoying it and having Mai Tais and shit, we're all gonna get to the same place. Pues pa' qué chingas vale la pena to be active, to sacrifice yourself. So, it's all this, this pushback happening and stuff. And I was watching this guy. Come on, I was real curious. How's he gonna do this thing? And so he took his time and he let it all sink in. And he wrapped them all up. And just as they're ready to crash against the rocks, and then everybody's ready to commit Chicano suicide. So he said, pero van a llegar al mismo lugar, pero no al mismo tiempo. Sí, es porque lo que ustedes están haciendo por su sacrificio, what you're doing by your sacrifice, by your commitment, by giving of yourself to your community, to the movimiento, is like prayer. Okay? You're praying to the Great Spirit, or Mateo, God, Dios, whatever you call the absolute being. You are praying to this entity by your very actions, because there's many forms of prayer. It's not only verbal, it's also physical. You are intending and acting out a good for a larger purpose, a group purpose. And so las leyes son las leyes. O Mateo, Dios, whatever you want to call the Great Spirit, is obligated to respond. That's how it works. It's a mutual, it's a two-way thing. It's not a one-way thing. So if you put out energy towards the cosmic consciousness in a concentrated manner, in whatever form it may be, either in prayer or in action, then the cosmic consciousness, a huevo, tiene que responder, because it's part of the way the universe functions, And we can get into that later, because that was the universe that was visualized amongst the different pueblos by what the maestro called the grandfather culture of the Americas, the Mayas. The Mayas are the ones que están más pesados, los cabrones que la chingada. Of course, understanding that the Mayas of today are the same Mayas as there was 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 years ago. Pero, evolution, just like, probably the Brits, los ancestros de los Brits were probably the ones who created Stonehenge. But the Brits have no memory of it, Martinez. That's evolution. But again, that can be recaptured. It's a process of internalization. That it can be recaptured, but for the general population, a lot of that knowledge has been lost, and understandably so. I mean, chinga, for the last 500 years, that population has been living under the thumb of, let's be honest, they've been living under the thumb of Europe ever since. Even today, you don't think the Catholic religion is not the thumb of Europe? Hell yeah, and everything else that goes with it. So. Yeah, a lot of knowledge has been lost, but anyhow, that was his lesson back then of the value of activism, versus that of just waiting for change to come, because it will come.
Yeah, it's interesting because you equating movimiento with prayer. And I've heard a lot of danzantes say that when they dance, it's prayer in motion. Right, their expression is a prayer. It's an intention. It's an energy shift. It's all of those things. But I don't think before then there was that consciousness. You saw, if you will, activism as activism. It's a protest. But I not until that indigenous thought began to integrate did we begin to understand that that energy, the impact of energy, the impact of prayer, and the connection to spirituality, to the spirit of our identity. So I wonder if you can talk to, because I know that, Maestro Andres had a lot of teachings. What were the teachings? I mean, you began to speak about one. What were the teachings that impacted your life that that you feel are most profound for people to understand today?
Well, I mean, without a doubt, the most impactful teaching was what he called la esencia de las cosas. Okay, which in English I translate over as the essence of all things. Okay, and what this is, this was the Mexica, because he was Mexica. Okay, he was a Chilango from Mexico City. But let me just kind of let people know a little bit about the maestro. Even though he looked, like I was describing, un indio, un indio común on the street. This was a learned man. I mean, this guy was a university graduate. He was in the second year of medical school. And the only reason he dropped out is even though his mom was greatly against it, was because he had already fallen in love with la danza. He was 23 years old and he had been danzando for 3 years already. And he was moving up real steadily in the ranks because las energías that evolve and move around la danza, which we're not aware of, okay? These are conocimientos, sabidurías that are only for certain ojos and only for certain orejas, and if, como dicen los gabachos, if you don't have the security clearance, no, you ain't gonna find out, okay? But he had those because of, again, for whatever reason, fue seleccionado por los espíritus, so he was moving up real fast in within that society. But getting back to his learned status, I mean, he knew several languages, including Nahuatl, English, enough to communicate and, teach, for instance, eventually at Irvine and other places. French, se va a su Francia, la chingada, And I mean, this was a learned man, and he had read extensively, and he had decided when he got to 23, having had to been in La Santa for 3 years, that the knowledge that really was important for him was not to be found in a university library, and certainly not coming from Europe, The true knowledge, the knowledge that mattered in terms of who he was as a person and his evolution as a human being towards eventually recognizing who he is as a cosmic being, that was to be found within his cultura, And he could only, do that if he dropped out, como decía Timothy Leary, tune in, turn on and drop out. So that's what he did. He dropped out. So anyhow, what he did during this time of his personal development, he came in contact with what was then the leading Mayan scholar in Mexico, who, even though he was an academic himself, Domingo Martinez Paredez, was considered a renegade totally by the academic community. And there was a number of reasons for that. Number one, the vato, literally, again, even though según he was a, quote, mestizo, man, that boy looked more Indio than most Indios that I seen in this country, okay? And so, you've been to Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mexico is a race-based society,
Right.
Me and you can move around pretty much all of Mexico. We don't get invited to the real high-tone white get-togethers, but we can pretty much navigate through most of other Mexican society. But if you're an Indio,
Yep.
No, your options are limited. So he was an Indio within academia, and he was preaching an entirely different message. He was preaching the native message, Martinez. He was preaching the knowledge that he had because this guy was academically a linguist. He had grown up as a linguist, but even probably more important than that, his mother was a curandera and espiritualista. She was a member of a line of the Mayan sabios called the Jimenez. That's what his clan eran de los Jimenez. I don't know if you're familiar with Jimenez. Jimenez in Mayan those are called the learned ones.
Right.
Those are the ones that were the day priests, the keepers of the calendario. All those, they come from that clan. So she was a member of that clan. Y era curandera to boot and espiritualista. So she taught him that side of things. Where he got his mestizo, apparently his father was partially mestizo. And so that's where he got, según, his mestizo from. That he liked to point out that he was a mestizo. And I don't blame the vato, because in Mexico, if you can claim being a mestizo rather than just being straight out Indio, that's going to open more doors for you.
Right.
But because of his sabiduría, he had a hard time, even though he was a very learned man, a member of philosophy associations worldwide, a linguist. He had a hard time being accepted, like I said, but he had a lot of influence within the native community as the flip side of that. And part of that influence was to expose Andres to a lot of the Mayan teachings and the Mayan knowledge that Andres lined up with the information that he was getting from the Conchero community. And that's when he developed this worldview that he articulated to me and taught me over a period of, 30 years, the esencia de las cosas.
Right.
And that is essentially, what that is it's a worldview very different than obviously the Christian and all other foreign religions. Very compatible, very similar to all Native American worldviews, more developed than Native American worldviews, because the Mayans really, these guys are sabios, okay? They actually broke it down into the biological and the organic components of religion, because what they did is they actually are known, incidentally, as the only community on Earth. And when I say this, I mean throw in the Dakotas, throw in the Hopis, throw in the Buddhas, throw in the Nepals, throw in the Tibetans, whatever. The only community on Earth that know that the absolute being exists because of their mathematics. Every other community on Earth believes in the absolute being through speculation and intuition, So that's how deep these vatos are. So he was able to convey that information to Andres, and Andres used that in order to articulate, this worldview that was fed to me in pedazos, okay? Earlier, I think you said something about, what was it? You said something about how the movimiento, how you hadn't heard the movimiento articulated in an energy sense. Well, the reason you haven't is because you haven't heard it articulated in a native sense. In a native sense, it's logical.
Yeah.
That any movimiento is going to be a form of prayer, because organically, what is it? Organically, it's an expenditure of energy. Break it down to its components. That's what the Mayans did. It's an expenditure of energy. Okay, that's what a movimiento is. When you get people out in the street, you're expending energy. When you're willing to march or you're willing to express love, you're expending energy. When you're in deep prayer, saying your rosarios, whatever, you're expending energy. So this energy, like I said, is focused like a ray towards the cosmic consciousness, which is energy itself. And of course, it has to be that reciprocation. So in an organic sense, all movimientos are prayers, because they're expenditures of energy, And so this is the worldview that it took a long while, Jerry. I mean, when we first got together, I had a lot more time with him because, like, for instance, he ended up spending a whole quarter with us at UC Irvine when I did I was into Chicano theater. I didn't get into that earlier because we kind of moved on from all that. Right. But I wrote several plays. I directed several plays. I was into Chicano theater, and that's actually how I ran into it. Obviously, behind being in Chicano theater and him being introduced to me through Luis Valdez at that festival.
Well, I remember in the mid '70s. It was at some type of gathering that I was at with, because at that time I was studying psychology, and I was working or had begun to work on Chicano psychology and healing and all of that, but there wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a lot of places you could go to really hear that, and there was a group of us that would gather and we began to talk about doing ceremonia, fiesta maíz, fiesta colores, all of those. But Andres was at one of those gatherings and he spoke. And I remember as I was a youngster at that time. I was in college, and it blew my mind when he began talking about us being connected to the cosmos, right? Us coming from the cosmos. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I want to know about
did he throw the Andromeda beginning?
Yeah.
Right on. That blew me away too.
And I was blown away. I'm saying, wait a minute, how, this is like extraterrestrial stuff. That, I mean,
Really,
I didn't understand the interconnectedness, of what he was presenting at that time, because it was so different to what I had heard and and at that time had integrated in terms of the teachings. And I think, what you mentioned in terms of culture and identity, culture and identity were more in terms of our traditions and our values, but it really hadn't been introduced at that time in the 70s for me in terms of a philosophical consciousness, a spiritual consciousness. And even though I grew up with, my mom, used to curar niños and do all of that, it was something we're told, don't tell nobody, don't tell the priest at the church. And it was more like, and then when I got to school, they said those were folk ways. Those are just, folk ways of pobre gente, poor people. They're just doing things. It's all, But when he began to talk about them, it began to open up an avenue in me and saying, wait a minute, we have a history here. We have an identity that goes way back, and it really opened up. I mean, at first it was like shock to me, but then it opened up a portal in me that I'm saying, I come from a long lineage of wisdom, a long lineage of medicine, a long lineage of knowledge, of very brilliant people, but I had never considered that before, until I heard him and some of the other maestros that were around, and I'm sure that in your journey with him, there's probably certain things that he was sharing with you was blowing your mind too,
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there was many incidences. I mean, one of them that sticks in my mind, me and my wife had just flown into Mexico City. It was up, I think, 1975, algo así, más o menos. And for una razón u otra, me di cuenta that he was at this one apartment of someone who had died about 30 days before. I guess it's la costumbre for them to velar like 30 days after. So when we got there, it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and sure enough, there was a group of about 30 people in there. And they were all, cantando, with the charango, and then you could see the velas were burning, the copal was burning, and it was just a small little one-bedroom apartment. And so, but the energy was just nonstop, electric kind of a deal. And right around como las 11 de la noche, me di cuenta, nobody was eating or drinking, nothing was just un canto, or whatever, alabanza they call them, I believe.
Right.
Una alabanza tras otra. Like, man, stop. I noticed that the main candle, all the candles had burned down except for one. And I noticed that this candle was just, the only thing that was lit on there was the wick, There was no wax in that thing. I think it was way down in the bottom. Pero no por nada, Jerry, man, we didn't get out of there till about, como las 6:30, las 7 de la mañana. That pinche wick burned all night long, know. And I knew it was burning there because era la luz del camarada who was, making his way through the Milky Way, or hopefully was already back in Andromeda. But it was just the energy, energy, the alabanza that kept that fire burning, man, And then it was kind of magical because here we are, me and my esposa, todos velados de la chingada. We want to go to a hotel room. And, no, you're not going nowhere. You're going with my Malinche, La Soledad. I never met any of his group, La Soledad. That was his woman helper, right? So Soledad was married to this Czech guy that had this Volkswagen van, and I nos arrancamos, and they take us up to the mountains of Tlaxcala, man, up there with these, I kid you not, like a 12-foot high corn and stuff, and
wow.
And it was magical. We went to go see a wedding entre the Tlaxcaltecas, se casaron entre la milpa, And then afterwards, in a very humble room, they had all these tables, and they sat all the mestizos down first. I noticed that, that kind of shit I noticed, And they fed us some simple food, but it was real good, including that pulque, man. That thing, I like that pulque, But it was a magical day. And then That's a lot of magical times. I mean, probably the last magical time I had with him, frankly, was in Chalma. Chalma is very special. I don't know. Have you ever had a chance to go to Chalma?
I've never been to Chalma, but I've heard a lot of stories, and my compañera.
If you ever have, I don't know if you're a Catholic or not, even if you're not a Catholic, which I am not, incidentally, I would still encourage you to go because, and of course, I was fortunate to share Chalma with Andres and his group, okay? This was May of 1990. Como te dije antes, I had come to the Big Island in 1988. Me había enamorado. This is a society that was, minority and stuff. And so my comadre who came with us said, no, go to this other island, Kauai, which we went the following year in 89. And like I said, that was to remind me of the Salinas Valley. So me enamoré, and I put it out there, okay? I told the universe, look, I really want to go, but at the same time, I got so much going for me. I was a lawyer, believe it or not, in Fresno. And actually, I was making some pretty damn good money, I had a nice chante. I mean, we had fixed up the chante, even had a pool in the backyard, and my mortgage was only $225 a week,
Wow.
I mean, a month, I mean, it was only 5 minutes from my law office. I mean, everything going. I was 44 years old when, you got everything going, man. What are you going to do? My kids are starting, my oldest had already graduated from high school. My second oldest was graduating that same year. But I told the universe, ¿sabes qué? I want to go, but, all these things have to happen for me to go, and, como son las cosas, they all pinche happened, and that scared the shit out of me. You mean, you're what I put out there on the table that, no, I said, I'm going to throw it out there, but I know it ain't going to happen. That's going to be my out for not going.
Right.
But they all happened.
Yeah.
And so I told the maestro, estoy muy, disconforme, I really don't want to go, but, something's telling me I should go. He says, vete a Chalma, vamos a Chalma juntos, So I flew down there with backpack a la chingada here in the airport, took the metro over to his chat. He had a little apartment there in the Colonia Obrera. And he was in there. He was a healer, right? Besides his other things, he used to heal with moxa. And he had una línea de gente going outside the door. And he was in there rezando and applying the moxa left and right. So I waited several hours, reading my book. And so finally the following day we got ready. I slept there with him that night. And the following day he says, vamos, and he was always in a hurry. That boy, I don't know if you ever tried keeping up with him.
No.
He was walking.
A lot of energy.
His walk was a jog, man. Sometimes more than a jog. So anyhow, we're going all over Mexico City, and he's getting all the people together, and finally nos arrancamos with about 2 cars of mostly all vatos from his group called Xinachli. Okay? So we go down to Cuernavaca, and Cuernavaca was really where all the Malinches, all the women were from. The Malinches looked at what the men had put together and said, no, it was tennis pendejos. No, you didn't do shit here. We had to spend several more hours because the women had to fix everything that these vatos had not. So finally, here we go. About 4 cars down to Chalma. And this is a good time to talk about because one of the questions you posed was, what is the impact of your cultura? How it has impacted you in your life journey? What I saw on this trip to Chalma was what I had seen when I was 11 years old. When I went to Aguascalientes with my abuelito, and he decided to take me to San Juan de los Lagos to go see La Virgen de San Juan de los Lagos. And when we went to that, we went on a train, and what I saw on the train just amazed the shit out of me because I was seeing all these people walking, and on mules, y a la chingada for and according to my abuelito, some of them were like, it was going to take days for them to get to San Juan de los Lagos, And finally, when we got to San Juan de los Lagos, we finally got in front of the church, and he said, Íncate, what? Because the pinche church was still about 100 yards away, Íncate, And to me, it was puro pedo. Of course, it wasn't 100 yards away, but in my mind, it was, But, that intensity, And so, yeah, nos hincamos and we kneeled our way all the way in front of the altar. Wow. What impressed me back then as an 11-year-old was the intensity of faith and belief from our gente that is just, you cannot see it in this country. Aquí it's like everything else. It's for sale. Religion is for sale, you know. You don't even have to go to church as long as you give 10% or whatever, you know. Pero en Mexico, it's all about tus creencias. That's what drives your life. That's what makes your life. That's what makes you who you are. And I saw that same intensity even more so in Chalma, because Chalma, is very few people apparently don't know. It's actually the second most visited Catholic shrine in Mexico. Wow. The most, of course, is Tepayec con la Virgen, right? But Chalma is number 2. And so what I saw in Chalma was a repeat in many ways of what I had seen in years earlier on the way to San Juan de los Lagos, except this time estaba en las montañas. And then para acabarla de chingar, I honestly saw people hincados, Jerry.
Wow.
Hincados. They were going to hincar their way, even though it would take several weeks to get to Chalma. But that is the intensity and the passion that you're introduced to as you make your way to Chalma. Then when you finally get there, it's a little pueblillo way up in the mountains, about 2 hours más o menos south of Mexico City. And there's this big, big oak with a little stream that's running next to the oak. So there is where you stop. Y ahí te bautizas, or a mí me bautizaron. For all the new people that come for the first time, it's part of the tradition que tienen que ser bautizados right there at that stream, So you integrate all the energy. So from there, it was just a short distance into Chalma itself. Like I said, it's a small pueblillo, probably, I don't know, maybe a little over 1,000 habitantes kind of a deal, And there was probably, I don't know, 8,000 people there. I mean, obviously there was there's no hotels there. Okay, back then, 1990, there was probably a couple of hostels, whatever, and they were all full of chingada. So I was wondering, where the hell are we going to stay? Well, Andres had a place that he always stayed in, and that was his spot. And it was on top of, in the Campo Santo, I said, what? You mean I'm going to sleep on top of a beach grain? You want to sleep? You're going to sleep on top of the bucket grain, So yeah, I pitched my pinche tent. After some pulques that evening, I went to sleep con la mentalidad de, hey, si el muerto puede descansar, pues yo también, And I went to sleep. But Chalma was so special because for so many reasons. I mean, first of all, the energy there is unbelievable. Yeah. It's like, it's this church that was built, I guess, back in the middle 1500s. And it's unlike any other church. It's so ancient. It's the only church that I have ever seen in my life where you have where Tezcatlipoca. You walk into the church and the mural on your left is Tezcatlipoca. But they call him, it got known by a different name. Lo conocen por otro nombre because Tezcatlipoca had a number of different names, right? He had one of his names was que era el dueño de las cuevas or whatever. I think they used that name. But the bottom line is it's Tezcatlipoca, And it's weird to go into an old Catholic church and you walk right in, there's this huge mural of Tezcatlipoca before you walk into the remainder of the church, And so what there was all these different danzante groups from all over central Mexico. There were so many groups that there was danza nonstop 24 hours a day for 4 days. During the night, las 3 de la mañana, you could hear them. Because they rotated, Martinez. They would rotate. I can still hear the cascabeles ringing in my ear from hearing them that early in the morning, and the energy that they promoted, So this was a very busy time. There was a lot of electric energy, and I finally got some time alone with the maestro. And I posed, the issue that was, estaba llevando la chingada, man. Am I going to really have to make this move? Because, I got everything going for me in Fresno, man. I said, ¿sabes qué? I've talked to the Seres. Okay? He was in contact with a spiritual group which he called Los Seres, And this spiritual group is, according to what he related to me, was made up of gente or espíritus that had been part of the Indiada when they lived human lives from pretty much all of Mexico and probably into Central America, and who knows, maybe some of them even were into the Southwest or whatever. But anyhow, the way he related to me, then this was a spiritual group whose primary purpose was to promote the native consciousness amongst the Mexican people. That the Mexican people needed to return and needed to not lose in the Mexican consciousness and needed to return to that consciousness because that was the road towards their personal and group liberation, And so that's the group that he was in communication with, and he said that he had a contact with them, and they had told him, he said that, he was talking to me in Spanish, and you have to go. For one reason or another, he said, I don't know how, but they've told me that you are a conduit to the Asian community. And we've already contacted, they were talking, as said, we've already talked to the spiritual kahunas. And we've essentially reached an agreement with them. When you go there, you have to always respect those islands, because they don't belong to you. You're always going to be a guest in those islands. And you have to respect and honor that tradition. As long as you do that, the spiritual kahunas will take care of you and your family, and you'll be fine.
Wow.
That's something, I said, wow, Yeah, I mean, you receive messages like that and stuff, like, it was like...
So how long have you been in Hawaii now?
30 years.
Wow.
30 years. So that's what I did. I went to Kauai. The first thing I did is I asked around, is there any kahunas on this island? There was 2 of them. One of them was on the west side, close to where I was, but what they call the Waimea side. But those people, they don't hang with outsiders. But on the north side, there was one that was más abierto, had already been hanging around. Probably some gabacho hippies from the North Shore, whatever. He was open to meeting me. So sure enough, yo me fui and I did my duty, I went out there, I told Abato where I was from, who I was representing, what I had been told, and I asked permission to be on his island. And he gave it to me, Y desde entonces, I mean, it's been...
Yeah.
It's been in a nutshell, I'll just tell you, starting out, like everything else, there was a lot of life challenges, We set up a rest after we found out. I was practicing law. It was not the same as Califas. And I could tell that wasn't going to feed the family. I still had my law office open in Fresno, which I didn't sell till 94, precisely for the same reason. I was conservative, Remember, I'm a rural Chicano. I'm a conservative.
Right.
So if I wanted to come back to Califas, I mean, that was my lifeline back. But I sold that in 94 when I became convinced that I was never going to come back. But the first years were tough because we ran into a hurricane. But then following that, we started making tortillas in the back in a small little machine, believe it or not, And, when you fill the hole, Johnny, como they say in the movie, fill the hole, Johnny, fill the hole, Escalante, right? Was it that mathematics movie? Fill the hole, Johnny. Well, we filled the hole because there was no one making fresh tortillas. So we started making fresh tortillas in a little rinky-dink, pinchy tortilla machine in the back. But Safeway in 94 called and said, hey, man, our customers love your fresh tortillas. Can you come into our store? They talk like surfers over here.
Right. So
we went in there, and by the end of the year, we were in all those stores. And then by the following year, I called Costco, and they said, hey, if you move your operation to Oahu, you can come here. We can go into our warehouses. Me and my number 2 son, his name is Quetzalcoatl, we went to Oahu. Nos establecimos, and we fought a lot of wars. It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
For almost, 7 years, más o menos, nos llevamos a la chingada, but stuck it out, and now we are, gracias a Dios, the number 1 tortilla company in the islands,
Wow.
And I retired in 2010, and in 1997, of course, during the time that I was working on developing the tortilla, I found out, de repente, from my sister-in-law, is that maestro had passed away, and it really impacted me. And even though, I could probably put a couple of, nickels together, gracias a Dios, I had some frequent flyer miles on United that I was able to tap into and get a round-trip ticket to Mexico City. And when I went there, I was shocked because here was a man who had who had brought La Danza to the Southwest, who had spread knowledge about our ancestors throughout, that same area, had contacts with a lot of native tribes in this country, all the way up to the First Nations in Canada and stuff. And there was only 6 Chicanos who showed up for his ceremony. There was 3 Tejanos, my wife, myself, and my compadre from San Juan Bautista. There was 6 Chicanos there, And that shocked the hell out of me. But following that then, of course, during all this time, I'm going to go back to La Esencia de las Cosas, because when he started teaching me back in 1972, like I said, the longest time that we shared was at 1 quarter.
Yeah.
After that, we would just share times here and there, kind of a deal, Martinez. But he would always, it was like he was always rounding out edges and hearing me out on what I was capturing, what I had captured, whatever. And I was working all this in my mind while I was, being a campesino lawyer and raising 5 kids and everything else you do when you're in your 30s and 40s, Martinez. And so I put all that indigenous philosophy on the side and most of the time until he was in town. I wasn't putting it all together, Right. So it wasn't until almost 2013, I guess it was, and I realized that, he's been passed away now for I guess it was 2012 2012. He's been gone for 15 years, and I haven't seen nothing from nobody. Yeah. And what el mensaje que dejó, and I would tap into some camaradas, from here and there, and hey, have you heard anything? No. The only one, Segura, que maybe he might have something that outlined what Andres was talking about was Ricardo Duran from Fresno. I don't know if you ever heard of Ricardo Duran. Yeah, he did a lot of your kind of work. Ricardo, he was in your communications since the 70s, 60s actually, probably. So anyhow, nada. So I said, gee, oh man, I just cannot, something within me did not allow for me to not do nothing. Now I know, of course. Right. Now I'm very very well why I did what I did when I did it, because the spirits were kicking my pinchy ass, Right. And in the process of, I decided I was going to try to finally put together all this information, all this knowledge that he had given me in a cohesive, understandable, outline of what he was talking about, kind of a deal, Martinez. And so what I started doing, I started looking at a lot of my old papers, because at one time I was, a very heavy reader. I used to do a lot of note-taking and this and that. And I ran into this one interesting note that that I wrote down. I even dated it. It was sometime in 1980. He had visited Fresno. And he told me then that he had a conversation recently with Aceres about me, and that they had told him to tell me that they had assigned a spiritual guide to be my spiritual guide for all matters concerning La Cultura going forward. Wow. And his name was Koya Metzli. So I just made a little note of it and stuff and set it aside, So here I am 32 years later in 2012, and I'm looking through, all the stuff to try to, like I said, put together some format of how this all fits together. And then I see this note, and I said, all right, come on, Macias, get up, you pendejo, cabrón. Yeah, the maestro's gone, but you got somebody else. Right, Los Espíritus waiting for you, and, by then, we haven't even had a chance to discuss it, but, I knew the spiritual world existed. I mean, I had so much interaction with the spiritual world. It was not a doubt, Dennis. So that's what I started doing. I started bringing it all together, listen to the good angel on my good side, and before every writing session, le pedía a Koya Metzli, el maestro, and the spiritus to help me. And that's how the Compassion of the Feathered Serpent was written. Yeah. And it all finally came together. Now, I will say this, I made a shorter version of that precisely because I wanted to make it short, and I wanted to make it real simple, precisely because I really wanted to reach, no por nada, I wanted to reach the cholada, okay? Right. And that's why walking the red road on Chicanismo has the cholos on the front.
Right.
Because that's who I wanted to reach, that cholada, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you read that and you compare that, even though it's a shorter description, you're probably going to see some already evolution from what I wrote down in Compassion of the Feathered Serpent. But I will say this, where I was when I wrote Walking the Red Road, which is 5 years ago, I guess because I'm getting ready to go after the happy hunting ground, and I know this is my last text, you know. What I'm working on right now, Jerry, I'm working finally on getting to the point of understanding, or at least describing the initial process of becoming a cosmic being.
Mm.
And meaning that, las cosas se han aclarado mucho since I wrote the first 2 books. And so I'm working on that, hope, which I, likely to think will be my final one. Primeramente Dios, el pinche COVID don't take me before that, Because as you know, when we reach our age, we don't take for granted that the jefito's going to be there tomorrow, or that we're going to be around to enjoy the jefito tomorrow. It's just, lo que mande Dios kind of a deal. But that's where I'm working on, and it's all coming together. And, that's my, por una razón u otra, why I was given that role. I never found out. I would ask the maestro many a times throughout my almost 30-year relationship with him. Maestro, are you talking to somebody else? Are you, le estás dando la misma información? Because I wanted a compañero or a compañera to relate to compare notes and say, hey, what was your take on this and this and that?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Just you. Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why. The only thing he could come up with was that tú estás en una buena situación. Mm-hmm. Tú no estás aliado con nadie. Mm-hmm. Tú no eres marxista, no estás metido con el campesino, no estás. In other words, I was an independent player. Yeah. No, plus I was not an academician, because I got screwed out of academia, which at the time, I took hard, but then later I accepted. That's how I was able to now articulate and capture what I've done so far and what I'm doing now. Yeah. Because had I gone into academia, my mind would have gone elsewhere, and I would have been frozen. It wouldn't have allowed for that kind of access to that information.
Well, come to realize now that all of us have this sacred journey, our own sacred journey, our own sacred purpose. And I just want to give thanks because it's your choice whether you take that journey or not. It's your choice whether you took that trip or you did the sacrificios, because, give up a law practice and to go here and to do all these things, you take a risk. You take a risk, and you have to challenge, what your Western mind would think is most appropriate to connect with that spiritual part of you that is really, guiding you. And so, and I just want to say, give you thanks for you taking that journey, because in you taking that journey, it then allowed you to transfer, energy, spirit, knowledge, wisdom, and now put it into writing, so that we have that for prosperity. And it then also motivates that next generation to take that and develop it further.
Exactly.
Because we're in an evolution, as you said.
Yeah, it's constant. Change is constant. Yeah. I mean, to me, just further, let's say, taking it another further step in terms of my exploring, the essence of what it means to be a cosmic being, is that I firmly and honestly believe, Jerry, and I need to put this out on this podcast, is that there is a road to liberation for Chicanos. Okay? There is a very definite road. Okay. And I know a lot of Chicanos are not going to want to hear this, but I never stopped believing in God, Mm-hmm. And so that was the great liberation that the maestro offered, that you could continue to believe in God, and passionately, like the Mexican people have shown me, and continue to be themselves. Of course, they do it in the form which the academicians call synchronism, right?
Right.
They've blended in el catolicismo con el indigenismo, And have you ever had a chance, incidentally, to go to Chiapas?
No.
In San Juan? Oh, man, if you ever get a chance to, Jerry, check it out. In Chiapas, it's a small little pueblillo. What is it's called? I don't know. It's right outside of Chiapas, about 7 miles away. Man, that is the wildest Catholic church you've ever been into. That's the kind of syncretism that the Mexican people have developed. But getting back to the liberation, right now, obviously, we're born and raised in a country that has a belief system that is very materialistic in its views, and it promotes materialism in so many ways as a means for you to fulfill whatever you want to achieve in your life. So if that is what if that is what fulfills you, well, fine, you're in good shape. You don't need to go elsewhere. But if eso no te satisfecha, if that leaves you wanting, then what I'm saying is that consider a native belief system, one that doesn't utilize any of the prophets to get you to God. Okay, it's the same God.
Yeah.
There's only one God. There's only one Great Spirit, whatever you call the Great Spirit, Jehovah or Hunabku or Allah or Dios. It's still the same absolute being. So it's just different paths.
Right.
And so my belief, and I believe that is my purpose within the movimiento, given my experiences in life, both in the movimiento and since, is to promote and try to explain as much as I can, as simply as I can, this path, this road, so that Chicanada can absorb it and have an opportunity to see the simple, logical, organic, a native aspect of what a worldview can be like. A worldview that includes you being in harmony with all of nature. A worldview that recognizes that part of this harmony is you're going to have opposing forces. It starts at the atom level, right? You have the neutron and the proton, and what are they doing? They're fighting each other to be in harmony. Well, of course, that means that, like right now, you have the beast, also known as the 45. Of course, he represents la maldad. He represents the negativity, and now you have 40% roughly of the population that are following it. So instead of getting all hung up on the fact that these people exist, understand that it's an organic situation. Of course they have to exist. If the 40% of his vampires didn't exist, why would there be a need for 40% progressives? There would be none. Who would we meet as a progressive? Who would I measure? Who would I measure myself against if I can't measure myself against a Trumper? So once you understand that basic understanding that así es la vida, then you don't get hung up over that stuff. You start looking at things organically. You start looking, and then everyone's individual.
Yeah.
Because obviously I've described the worldview, I've described efforts that are personal to myself, that have been influenced by where I come from and the experiences that I've had. But you know what? It's not going to be the same for a vato or a ruca that grows up on the streets of East LA or whatever. Everybody's going to have a different experience.
Right.
So apply your experiences to this worldview, and consider it. Like I said, it doesn't, you don't need to stop believing in God. You might find that there is your true liberation, number one. Well, number two, I got to get this one in too, because I don't think it's understood very well or appreciated. When Alurista busted out el plan espiritual de Aztlán.
Right.
Okay, in 1969 in Denver, he made a tremendous declaration that I don't think is totally understood or appreciated today. He declared two things. Number one, the establishment of a Chicano mestizo homeland, Aztlán. Okay, and he identified us as being bronce, not brown, even though there's a brown beret, but bronce. Now, why is bronce important? Brown is what Arabs and Hindus are. Bronce is what raza is. Why bronce? Because bronze is a shade of red. And so bronce means we're part of the red nations. ¿Me entiendes? Nowadays, you see in Facebook everywhere, a lot of young raza expressing themselves. Even a lot of them, they change their names to Huitzilopochtli, all kinds of names, right? But they're like, they're in a carnival throwing darts on the pega. But The bottom line is you already have an identity. You don't have to go ask the Lakotas or the Hopis or the the Lagunas over there in Mexico, or you don't even have to go to the Zapotecs or the Yaquis in Mexico. You have your own nation. It's called Aztlán. Okay? And you are part of the Red Nations already porque eres bronce. All right? You're a mestizo, but part of being a mestizo, like I said, is having the same grandmothers as the full bloods. So, las raíces son las raíces. Right. You cannot deny that. So, find comfort in that. Él es Dios.
Thank you, brother. I just want to again thank you for your journey, but also being willing to spend this time. I know that it's what a privilege it is to sit with you. And to hear your words. And I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours. This is only the tip of the iceberg, and maybe we'll plan to do that. But I just want to acknowledge you that way, and say to those that are listening that you've heard, a lineage of wisdom, a lineage of stories that goes way, way back, and I want to lift that up because I think we talk about elders all the time, we talk about wisdom keepers all the time, we talk about those that carry the narrative, and today we've heard from one of those, one of the carriers of that wisdom that goes way, way back. And I say that we have those in our communities too. Go talk with your grandmothers. Go talk with the grandfather. Go talk with the little viejitos, the winos in the corner. Go talk to the ones that don't seem like they know anything, but they really know a lot.
Yeah,
they know the history. They have medicine within them. They have knowledge of how to get through stuff and not lose yourself. And I think that's the message that the maestro is sharing with us, that we're connected to the cosmos. We're connected to a greater source in whatever name you call it. But find that within you, and find that within your relationships, and find that within the culture, so that we can be ready to continue with el movimiento, continue with that prayer. That's part of our responsibility of carrying this on for the next generation. So when the next generation comes and those 7 generations come, they don't have to wonder who they are. They don't have to wonder whether they have a sacredness and a raíz. They will know that. And I think that's part of our sacred responsibility. So thank you for listening, and continue to pass the word on and share it with other people. Give us a review. But and for the maestro, look up his books. He's got some beautiful teachings in those books, and he's writing another one. We'll wait for that one as well. That's going to come along the line. But stay connected and continue learning. And we thank the Creator and the ancestors for today. And may you all be blessed in your journey. O Meteor.
Él es Dios.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.